So hello, everybody. Thank you for jumping on with us today, and thank you to all the sponsors, Procter & Gamble, Kroger, First Financial, Taft, and KMK. Um, this program is going to run for about 45 minutes, and we get to hear from some very awesome people today, and we'll have a chance for question and answers at the end for about 15 minutes. If you can, please turn off the cameras. And reminder to fill out the survey at the end. I'll be sending that in the chat. We will be recording this so that you guys will all have a chance to go back and watch if you are unable to make it or need to share it with your team members. So at this point, I am going to kick it off to Megan, Addie, and Brittany to take over.
Hi, everybody. So Michael, I don't know if everybody else is, but I'm seeing like a zoomed in version of your, like I'm seeing half of a slide there.
Let me
yes. Yes, thank you.
There Great. It is. Sorry.
No worries.
Wonderful.
Well, thank you for having us. So I am a partner at Keating Youth and Clee Camp, KMK Law, and what I focus on is intellectual property strategies and advertising and marketing and basically any kind of law to get a product like out the door to market. So I come in contact with a lot of fun companies like Pluie is one of the latest and greatest that has a super awesome product. So I invited them and was lucky enough to have them join us. So I guess I should also mention I worked at P&G here in Cincinnati for 12 years before I came in-house. So that's like a flip-flop of a typical career progression. Usually people start at a firm and then end up in-house. So I was in-house first and then came to a firm. So everything that I do, like all my decisions and strategy is kind of from like a business mindset. So that's all about me. And I'm always happy to talk with anybody about entrepreneurship or if you need like mentor type advice. So find me after this on LinkedIn. All right. So, Brittany, do you want to go first and just give a quick little introduction of yourself?
Hi, everyone. So happy to be here. Honored for the invitation to be a panelist today. I'm Brittany Heiser. I'm based here in Chicago, Illinois, downtown. And I started my career right out of college in product development for a company called Life Fitness, making fitness equipment. And I spent most of my career there really innovating how people exercise on treadmills, bikes, and cross trainers. And I always had just a strong desire to innovate and to bring ideas that I had to market. And some of my ideas you can see in health clubs around the world. I pivoted to manage a small fishing boat business called Crestliner and got to design fishing boats. But then I always wanted to start my own business. I always had a lot of ideas, but really focused on kind of the corporate world and worked for a great corporation for most of my career. But then I met Addie Gundry, and she had this amazing idea to reimagine the diaper changing experience for parents and babies in public. And I'll let Addie kind of share her story, but she was at the point where she was ready to prototype her product, bring it to market. And I met her in February 2020, and that's when we decided to partner and bring Pluie to life. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Addie.
Awesome, thank you. I'm keep moving around trying to fix the lighting, but this is as good as it gets. So I'm Addie Gundry. Thank you as well for having us here. And we are the Pluie women changing the diaper changing table for public restrooms. And my journey to founding a company and being an entrepreneur is non-traditional because I think most people's journey to that, having something of their own is, and that you have an idea, but you're often not in the exact right position to just drop everything and run with it, right? And so I had the idea to change the diaper changing table when my son, who's now almost 4, was just a baby. But I was working full-time in a test kitchen. So my background has all been in culinary. I went to culinary school, worked in fine dining restaurants for many years, then transitioned to media and worked for Martha Stewart, and I was competing on the Food Network television shows while pregnant with my children. And then when they were born, I had my son, had a dirty diaper, had this idea, and said, I think we could make a better table, but had no experience in product development. My only true experience that's relatively relatable was in innovation, and that my sort of last career in food was designing food products for large companies. And so I was a culinary designer in which I would create the next Starbucks beverage, Doritos potato chip. The consulting firm I worked with these large companies like P&G to help them create a pipeline for the future. And so I always said I had an innovation itch of some sort, but didn't have the experience to actually bring a product to life. And that's okay, because I've learned quite quickly that if you have an idea, if you can test if it's a good one, if you can understand the market, see if it's something that you could actually scale and grow, then you can find a team, you can find people like Megan to help you protect it. There's a lot of resources at your hands to really actually build a business. And so having an idea is actually the hardest thing, and I think the most important part of being an entrepreneur. And the rest, although not always easy, is actually easy in that you really can start to use your network, use people you meet throughout this amazing program to start creating that idea. So had the idea, I continued to work full time, certainly again, back to sort of, it's not always the right place, right time when you have an idea. You can't just drop everything. I had a family, I had to get a paycheck. And so I continued to work in a kitchen for almost 2 years while I kind of slowly developed this changing table on the side. So traditional kind of nights and weekends, I would work on Pluie with some contractors. So working with engineers and understanding, could we actually make this thing? I then met, realizing quite quickly though, we can make it, we can scale it. This is a big opportunity when you look at the market, look at this sort of sleepy category, ready for innovation. And so recognizing that an idea is one thing, but needing capital to launch it is another. And so I was then pregnant with my daughter and decided to raise my first round of fundraising while on maternity leave. So I had Claire, I spent 6 weeks with her and raising money, and then was able to go back to my kitchen job after maternity leave, give my notice and quit. And so at that point, like Brittany said, I met Brittany in February of 2020, and we together have spent the past year and a half bringing this idea to life. And then we just recently closed our second round of fundraising in April. So it's a lot of information, but to give you a little context of understanding that it's not always perfect timing and that there's a lot of steps to get to where you're at, but you have a lot of people to help you. And Brittany and I are your new friends who also, as Megan said, are happy to help.
Thank you. So students, we are just in terms of like the agenda a little bit. So we did some introductions, and then we have some Pluie slides to show you their product because it's really very nice. Nice to see. So we are going to do that for just a short little window, and then we'll have a couple poll questions for you guys just so we can kind of see where you are in thinking about this topic. And the topic again is lawyers, advisors, mentors, frenemies, and noise, and kind of distinguishing among all of those things. And then we'll have the Q&A that you guys typically have. So looks like the slides are up, and Addie and Brittany, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. So you can go to the second slide right away. So for those of you who don't know or much about diaper changing tables or have changed a diaper before, I'll tell you the first diaper I changed was when my son was born. I had no experience prior to that. But what we learned quickly though is that not everyone uses them, but everyone sees them. And so most people know what these diaper changing tables are. They recognize koala care, that koala badge down there. And everyone know that either uses them, knows them, is like, oh yeah, I've seen that. The 4 things that kept coming to mind when we did our consumer research, which is really important, was that they're outdated. People said, oh yeah, I've seen that thing. I feel like it's been on that same wall for 20 years. And I'll tell you, it probably has. The design is ugly. It's as beige and ugly as it could get, right? The most important word that kept coming up though was dirty. That for most people, whether it was dirty or it wasn't, it looked like it and it felt like it. So people didn't know when it was cleaned last. The color looked dirty. It just, nothing about it communicated clean. And when putting your child, especially a bare bottom, on a public surface, it just should not be dirty. The other two things that of course are important is that they're uncomfortable. It's very odd and awkward to go in and put your child on this rock hard piece of plastic. You don't do that at home. You have a changing table. And so it's strange how uncomfortable it is and really inconvenient all around, right? There's nowhere to put your bag, your stuff, it's dirty. It's just everything about it makes you actually want to leave the establishment and perhaps change your baby in the car or just get home. And so really, even if they are in the restroom, they're not something that people want to use. And of course, the last point is that we really often don't see them, and especially in men's rooms, which is really surprising. Still today, we often see them only in women's rooms, which not only is insulting to moms and dads, but just amazing to see how businesses have still made that decision. And so if they're there, they're ugly, they're dirty. And if they're not, I don't know what's better or worse, but that's the problem we recognized right away. And if you go to the second slide or the next one, we believe that now more recently with COVID, the problem has become more complex. And so because of what's going on, there's this heightened sense of awareness of germs, of being in public with your children. And so, you know, when I had the idea in 2019, this was pre-pandemic, but now people have just, again, this heightened sense of like what it means to be outside with your kids and germs. And so that's really kind of accelerated the growth of our business, which is interesting because before it was more of a nice to have, this needs to change. Now it's really a health and safety product. For the business, which is interesting, costs have doubled or tripled. So everyone has to clean more. You know, it's really, there's just this heightened sensitivity to it. And people are seeing that businesses need to spend more time, so labor, and then more cost on chemicals. The problem with that though, which is almost a catch-22, is that now businesses are spending more money on chemicals. Maybe they're cleaning them more often, which you think would be a good thing, but chemicals aren't great for baby's skin, right? Harsh bleached, harsh, you know, detergents. It's actually called toddler toilet, and that you can get dermatitis and rashes from sitting on toilets and diaper changing tables that have been coated with these chemicals. So this problem is just, again, more complex. It's like, okay, great, now they're clean, but this isn't even good for my baby now. So you can go to the next slide.
Hey, Addie, just before we move on to the next slide. So I think students, a lot of times people think they have to come up with a brand new idea that's never existed in the world. But a lot of times, you know, startups really take a product or a service that is in the market today and just make it better. So sometimes you don't have to think about, you know, this brand new product or service to bring to market. You can just make something better like Pluie has.
We spoke a little bit to how we met, so we can probably skip through this and actually talk about the more exciting thing is what Pluie is. This is what it looks like when it's open. This is a rendering. We do have over 40 tables though placed nationwide, including the Chicago White Sox Stadium, which is a very exciting one for us. And if you go to the next slide, I can walk through the features. So the UVC light system is of course sort of this winning feature, one of which that we were able to patent. So this is where now Megan is helping us look through the whole product and see what else we can do to protect this idea. So when you open the table, you can change your baby, you close it, and within 60 seconds, the UVC light sanitizes the entire surface. So we've been able to show that this is a very quick process, which is great. And it's a very powerful one because people will know, parents will feel protected that this surface is cleaned within 60 seconds after every single use. And we really believe that our product is the only one that can prove that, right? You know, even if these large companies are saying we clean every hour, we're always in there, it's still really hard for parents to feel that's true. And so this way the product does it itself and sanitize it completely. There's also some error in cleaning. And so in order to properly sanitize a surface, you often need to let the chemical sit for 3 to 4 minutes. It's called dwell time. And so a lot of times too, companies can just go in and wipe down the surface, and that doesn't mean it's actually sanitized. And so UVC light has that power that's, again, just much more protecting for people than even a harsh chemical, which we just talked about shouldn't be used. The light sanitizes a plush foam cushion. So what's even more exciting for me is that it feels like you're putting your baby on a soft office chair or car chair. So it's much more comfortable in terms of the cushiness of it, as well as actually the softness of the surface. And it just feels more welcoming and more, just more comfortable for baby. And it's a larger surface, which is great too. You put your diaper wipes, your phone, whatever you need, and all of that has been sanitized. The security strap retracts back into the system. We noticed that we often found them broken or missing, which is a liability for the business. And if they are there, a lot of parents don't use them. They kind of hang out, it's hanging out over the edge. I often say it's like this dead rat. You want to just like flick off the table. It's just kind of gross. My kid puts it in its mouth, which is really alarming, right? It's just nothing about it is wanted. But if you do want it, and we do have to have it for safety and certification reasons, which we can also get into some of that later if you have questions about kind of bringing a product to life and understanding what is necessary to do so from a safety standpoint. So we have to have one, but we thought if we have to have one and no one likes using it and it hangs out and gets dirty, how do we get it back in the system into this kind of clean zone? So really, if so few people are pulling it out and opening it, it just has the integrity and cleanliness for much longer. It comes over the baby's belly and hooks on those little hooks you'll see on the side. So it's a much softer surface over the baby's stomach versus the traditional clip that I've actually clipped my child's skin into in a car seat on those clips. We don't like the clips. I don't know if we have any parents here, but I don't like the clips. So the last feature to speak to though is the multi-purpose handles. They're on both the left and right side. It's easier to open and close the table when you're juggling your child and your stuff. And then they also serve as diaper, baby changing, or diaper bag, backpack, purse hangers. So your stuff is not on the floor. And we decided quickly to launch with a better and best model. So the UVC light system was really sort of the hero feature of the table, but we realized quickly that a lot of people want changing tables for the comfort and for the design aesthetic. They loved what Pluie was about, but they said, hey, frankly, we don't have a lot of kids in here. We don't need to clean it constantly. We're a high-end restaurant, or we are a hotel chain that really doesn't have a lot of children in it, but we are required to have one by law. And so we noticed quickly that because 11 states nationwide actually have legislation that say diaper changing tables have to be in public restrooms, all these restaurants, all these other places that don't always have children but want that higher design aesthetic and comfort because it speaks to their brand, right? You walk into a restroom and you say, wow, this is really clean. I bet that means the restaurant's clean, right? And so we found that we could create the exact same table without the light system at a lower price point and the same, if not higher, of a margin for us as a business. What have I missed? I'll tell you, I talk quickly, and so stop me at any point.
No, that was great. And I think slide 7, you can actually see some pictures of Pluie out there in the world. We've installed Pluie in several dozen locations nationwide, including the White Sox Stadium a couple months ago. So I think what's important about product development too is, you typically do prototypes, then you can do a pilot, so you can actually get some consumer feedback with your products. What's been really interesting too about getting Pluie out in the world is seeing consumers, reaction to this new diaper changing table, both the parents and the children. And that's been so validating, as well as just what makes, our day-to-day really exciting is to actually see parents, caregivers, and babies using this product.
And we had a really hard time with this because it's a type of product, because it's B2B, it's hanging on a wall in a commercial building. And so unlike a consumer product, where if I was to make a Yeti cup and just wanted to send them to 1,000 influencers, say, hey, use this, tell me what you think. We didn't have the opportunity to pilot because Starbucks or some large company is not going to say, oh, sure, hang this thing on the wall 40 inches off the ground, put some babies on it, and take that liability. Back to probably something Megan would understand better than we would in terms of legal risk. But, until we actually had a product that was fully functioning and went through about 6 months of safety and certifications, we couldn't just pilot. We couldn't just ask someone to put it on their wall. And it was a big risk financially because we had to spend money on the tooling, on procuring parts, on basically making this entire thing go through the safety and certification process, which was also expensive. We had to get all the way to that point to even then see if people wanted to buy it, you know? And so I think every product is very different, but that's why a product this large and B2B, you know, with all the certifications that have to come with it, can be really complex financially, because we had to, in order to validate the concept, we had to put the capital up front. That sounds intimidating. It wasn't, though. I'll tell you right now, it all works out. You just keep going, one day at a time.
All right. Do we want to go through your last slide? Is there something on that one? Or
No, that's just the closing slide.
okay. All right. Do you want to tell them what pluie means, or kind of evokes the name?
Yes. So pluie means rain in French. And parapluie, which I'm probably not pronouncing correctly. I used to one day kind of think I spoke French in school, but that means umbrella. And I went to culinary school, like I mentioned, so my background was in food. I went to culinary school in France and then ended up working there for about a year during the rainy season, particularly in the south of France. And every day it would rain, and it felt like this fresh, clean start to the day. And so I liked that it felt the name sounded babyish, you know, it's obscure. It was really fun to name something, but for me personally, it felt just like this fresh, clean rain. And you'll see the raindrops in the P and the I, and then parapluie for umbrella, which we have some umbrella imagery in some of our branding, just felt protective. I remember being in the rain, you guys imagine looking up at an umbrella. And so when thinking about sort of what pluie meant to me as a founder, I remembered my time in school over there and working in restaurants. And I dropped out of college to attend culinary school. So took a risk, which I think, you know, the word entrepreneur really can apply to a lot of things in life, whether it's taking risks to go out on your own. It was very non-traditional over 15 years ago to say, I want to drop out of school and go to culinary school. So doing something like that, taking a risk in your education, in your career, in your life, I think is really what makes an entrepreneur. And so the name is somewhat personal to me, but in terms of how we present it as a brand, it's a cute name. Someone said it sounded like pooey, which is fine for poo on a table, I guess, but pluie is the name that we're hoping also to, when thinking of naming, that pluie is the business, but it also can be the product name. And so we're starting to also think, as we grow and present potential product line extensions, you know, how pluie is both the name of the business and then also kind of the actual product. So yes, similar to Yeti would be an example.
You know, and something to consider is when you're building a business, you know, you're so focused on the product or the service that you're offering, but it's really important to build your brand. And Addie will share that she had the name pluie. She had the brand identity established before she actually had a physical pluie in her possession. So I think what we would also share, just kind of as a lesson to, you know, people aspiring to start a business one day, is really think about the brand. And it's almost just as important as, you know, the product or your service that you're creating. And what we've learned when pitching to customers like Target, Starbucks, is that the emotional connection is at times just as important as, you know, the value of the product.
That's a great point, especially because, so, you know, we really invested up front on naming and then the branding, and it felt silly, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I don't even have a table, but this was important to me. And it's actually paid off itself in that we were able to trademark the word and the logo marks, or word marks, Megan, help me out, and the tagline. And, you know, that's a process that can be time consuming or expensive. And then we've never had to rebrand. You know, you see many startups that like start with a quick chicken scratch logo, and then later they end up having to do trademarks. They have to rebrand. And so actually, you know, I think you end up spending kind of the money and time no matter what. And so that's a great point, just of, you know, doing it from the beginning and really kind of establishing that brand, because now we're in a position to really kind of use those assets to grow.
Great, thank you. So Michael, do you think we could pop those poll questions up really fast? So we have a few poll questions. We just want to, there's I think 4 of them total, just to get a little bit of information about you guys. So then when we hop into the next part of the presentation, we can, you know, maybe tailor some responses. Okay, so the first one here, what type of organization do you want to be in after graduating? Large brand name company, small startup, or do my own thing? And then the second question, what do you think is the minimum capital required to start your startup? $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, or $1 million? So if you can answer that, we would appreciate it. Oh, I guess we got to scroll down. All four are here. So number 3, which of these people do you know, have, or use? A fellow entrepreneur, a lawyer, a mentor, a frenemy, or none of the above. So we're curious because you guys are still students and very young. Do you know these people? Do you have them in your lives? Are they family members? Have you met them through school? And then number 4, which of these people would you feel comfortable calling, emailing, or texting anytime with questions big or small? So maybe you know a lawyer or have a mentor, but would you feel comfortable asking them a question just casually? So if you can answer those, we appreciate it.
Still got some responses coming in, so I'm going to let it run for probably another 15 or 20 seconds.
Great.
I'll speak a little bit more, just Megan, while we're waiting for the answers to come in. You know, Addie had this idea in 2018, and then she worked with an engineer and an industrial designer to kind of bring it to life. But she went forward and filed a patent in like July 2019. And a lot of times people don't think about, you know, protecting their idea. And so sometimes you miss that opportunity to really protect your idea, and it's really a lot easier process than I think people realize. And especially if you find, you know, the right patent attorney like Megan, who will really help you understand, you know, what goes into filing a patent. But I would say also, you know, once the patent was filed, I think a lot of times entrepreneurs really, they don't share their idea until they take it public. And I think what was really nice is the way Addie and I met is because she started talking about her idea. She started, you know, sharing the concept with other moms, with other parents. And we had a mutual mom friend who said, okay, Brittany, you have to meet this woman, this friend of mine. She has this great idea to change the diaper changing table. And that's how we met. So if Addie had kept the concept for Pluie a secret until she was ready to publicly launch, we would never have met. She would not have already made such great connections, probably would not have been able to raise, you know, that first round of friends and family. So just keep that in mind as you think of ideas. It's okay to share. And if you have a great idea that you think is patent protected, eventually, you know, go ahead and reach out to your network to see who can help you. Megan, do you have anything to add around that?
Yeah, I saw we have a question from Bianca. What is the average cost to file for a patent on an idea equivalent to yours? And she says it depends on the complexity. Yes, you are absolutely right. It does. And there's different versions of patent applications. So you can file like the preliminary version called a provisional patent application, or you can file just the real one straight away, or usually people do both. So I mean, you could file a provisional patent application for a much smaller sum of money if you're just trying to get the date and have just the bare minimum requirements in there. So I think the filing fee, if you're like an independent inventor, just wanting to file a provisional patent application, the USPTO, the United States Patent and Trademark Office fee is $125. I believe it might have gone up a tiny bit, but so it's affordable if you have an idea, you want to just try to file something, you know, yourself, which you could potentially do. I always encourage you to work with a professional because they can give you a lot of like heads ups and watch outs and things. But I would say that like the most expensive patent application would probably be like $20,000. So somewhere in the middle there, like between like, you know, 8 and 10, I would say is the average of what I find that my clients end up spending. Sometimes a little less if it's a provisional patent application and doesn't have all the detail and all of the drawings and things like that. So But if you talk with an attorney, you can usually work something out that meets your budget. So maybe you only have $1,000 to spend. Well, then it's a question of, well, what can I get for $1,000? I know I'm not going to get the high quality, fully done application, but still it's something, and still you can get your, your foot in the door and get a date on the record at the patent office. So yeah.
Yeah, and I will say too, with my experience, I was coming from a place of certainly didn't know how big the risk was and didn't have the capital. My husband and I weren't going to just spend $20,000, right? There's no way we could do that financially. And I think coming from a personal standpoint, you don't need to, right? You can go to an attorney and say, hey, I have $1,000, or how can I learn to write part of the patent, and you edit it. There's definitely a way to kind of work around your budget. And then another resource we used was we took out a small business line of credit. So we formed Pluie as an S Corp in Delaware, and then we're able to take out a line of credit to pay for the patent application and work from the attorney. It was sort of, you take a bet on yourself and the business, but I knew, we can maybe charge $10,000 to a credit card because I know I'll raise money, or I know we'll, be building a product. And so there's obviously risk to starting something on your own, but I don't think you have to feel like you have the cash yourself, right? We did not just take money out of the bank and do this. It was definitely sort of a work in progress over time, and we used a line of credit. So, I think there's a way to work with someone to make your situation work.
Thanks.
Okay, so
Michael,
you're going to release the answers?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna push these out here for you guys. You should be able to see them now.
Yep, we see them. Okay, so it looks like for number one, what type of organization do you want to be in after graduating? Large brand name company is highest on the list. Do my own thing in small startup tide. Small company is last. Number two, what's the minimum capital required?
Oh, just a thought on number one. So what's interesting, my experience, very different than Addie's. I went into the corporate world and worked for a $1 billion organization. And I would say, I'm not surprised by the higher percentage of a large brand name company. And I would just say, look for opportunities within those companies that will give you a diverse experience, like product management, brand management. And I think really also, if you do go down that route of going with a large brand name company, also don't be afraid to, after you get, a year or two settled, ask to switch into a different division. So you could pivot from product management into sales. And so make sure you're also getting a very diverse experience within those larger companies. Okay. Sorry, Meg, you can go to number two.
Oh, no. I think that's a great point. I do think it's very interesting because I feel like a lot of people want to go into startups or do their own thing, but there is something to be said for, learning the ways of the world at a large company.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you establish this professional network that you can then leverage when you go to start your own business or work for a small startup, which I've done definitely with Pluie. I've really leveraged my professional network within my corporate organization.
Thanks. So number two, the minimum capital required, 50% of you guys thought it was $10,000. So I'm curious, Pluie, what would you guys say?
That's what I clicked on. I did the poll too. But I think that's pretty accurate. I do think yes and no. I think it depends on the type of product, obviously, but I think to start something, you really don't need more than that. I think when you actually realize you need capital, that's when you fundraise. So I think you could, easily get that together, whether it's by yourself with a line of credit, with friends and family, with a Kickstarter, to kind of have some money to begin doing things. But I think that's pretty accurate for the first sort of, is this an idea? How do we research? How do we understand the market? Do we need a logo, a 2D drawing? I think there's some research involved to get it to a point where then you need to raise capital. And so I think, again, especially attorney fees coming in when you think of a patent, but I know it was important to have my patent filed just even when I raised my first round of friends and family because they want to know it was protected. So I think just getting almost all your ducks in a row can end up costing almost $10,000 to then go out and raise money in any kind of form. What do you think?
Well, and we wanted to ask this question to really dispel the myth that you need $100,000 or $1 million to start a company. And now with, software at your fingertips, with all the different, apps that are available, I mean, you could start a business for a couple $1,000s. So please do not let, your lack of income be a barrier to getting your idea out there.
Yeah, and I think speaking of that too, I baked cookies for a living, right? Like I had no experience in what I was doing. I didn't realize that S corps had to file taxes a month before personal taxes was due, and then realized it a couple days before and Googled it and filed taxes. Like, I think Google alone, it's like you can learn really quickly what you need to do, and it's inexpensive because of YouTube and all these, you can learn how to do anything, right? And so you definitely don't need a lot, and you don't need a lot right away, like in chunks. You can have a few $1,000s, and then you can ask your friends or Kickstarter or do a small raise of $25,000 or 50. It's like, you don't need to go from 1,000 to 100,000 or to 1 million. I think you just kind of you raise as little as possible, to get you what you need. And so that's something I think we learned as well. It's not like we have to go from 1,000 to 1 million. You kind of just continue to raise as you hit certain milestones where it just becomes less daunting. It's not like, oh shoot, I have to go out and raise $1 million right now. It's really, what do I really need for the next 6 months? And then I'll raise again. And I think you just kind of bank off the progression you make and hit those targets and continue to get capital in different ways.
Thank you. I hope
our products are faster, I'd say too. We have a long sales cycle in terms of going to a business, whereas, as soon as you can start generating revenue, I mean, my gosh, then it becomes more exciting and easier to have cash flow in that way as well.
Yeah. Well, I think these next two questions are very interesting results. So which of these people do you know or have or use? So half of us say a fellow entrepreneur, followed by a mentor, and then a lawyer, and nobody answered frenemy. So I think that's interesting. In light of the next question, which of these people would you feel comfortable calling, emailing, texting? So this was kind of a tie between entrepreneur, lawyer, mentor, and then somebody answered frenemy here. So that's an interesting one to me. So this kind of sets the stage for the actual content that we're going to jump into here. And since we're down to like the last 17 minutes or so, if you have questions, feel free to type them in the chat or just pipe in and let us know if you have a question. So we'll kind of go through this part, like as you're building a team, and even before you have a team or before you have a company, and as you're just going through life like you guys are right now with the goal of maybe in the future, maybe I'll be an entrepreneur, then how can these different people help you along the way? Who matters and when? What's help? What's a distraction? So Brittany and Addie, let's start with the question, like who really matters and when? Like what's a good time to engage these people?
So I can chime in here. A couple things. So obviously like friends, just supporting you along this journey, sometimes there are very stressful moments. So I would say like we've engaged friends, our husbands, our family, right out of the gates. But then really the professional network has been, so important to leverage. And as we go from designing a product, really figuring out our sales strategy, to understanding our funding strategy, we really relied heavily on kind of that professional network as well as lawyers. I mean, we have so many lawyers involved now. We have, patent lawyers. We have a child product liability lawyer who's out of New York. We also have lawyers that help with the paperwork in terms of hiring employees and contractors. Also, lawyers helping us with paperwork for the rounds of funding. So, lawyers are very critical to have, especially as you scale and grow the business.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Addie.
It's just to speak to lawyers. So we have an attorney here in Chicago who helped us with both fundraising rounds. And the first one was when I was on maternity leave. I hadn't met Brittany yet, and I was alone and had never raised money before in my life. I really knew nothing about it. I didn't know what documents I knew nothing. And it is confusing. That is something I tried to Google and read books, but it is complex. And so although attorneys obviously charge on an hourly basis to help you, it was worth it because I really, truly, Brian, if you're out there, hey, I used to copy and paste his emails, which is like, he literally told me like what to, what you need to say and like how you do this, what is a convertible note and how to explain it. Because also then I had to explain what I was trying to do to friends and family who didn't have much experience investing in venture anyway. So it's not as though I was going out to experienced investors. They had questions for me because they were similar to me in that they're not used to doing this. And so I relied so heavily on Brian to just coach me through it. And it worked really well too, because although I was billed for all of that education, because it was his time to help write emails, to draft the paperwork, to even jump on the phone with me and the potential investors, I knew I was going to raise the money, which would help pay for the attorney bills. And then, I was so proud of the moment when I was able to answer questions on the phone and didn't have to quickly look at my emails, right? Or I didn't have to copy and paste his email because I actually could sit there and type it and understand it. And so I think, really relying on attorneys in their verticals or their expertise is so important because you don't have to know everything. I don't know anything about patent law, right? But Megan does, so we're good. It's like, you just have to kind of focus on what you know and what you're good at and let other people help you run the business, especially when you get to this point. It's like, I don't need to spend my time trying to learn certain things that other people can help us with when I should be focusing on sales and what I do best for Fluey. So I think it's really relying on those attorneys and people to help you, and then recognizing what you don't know and seeing if you can have someone else do it kind of essentially for you or with you, so you don't waste your time on it. Your time is valuable.
Thanks. And as the lawyer here, that's part of your team, I will say that when I work with startups, what maybe surprises me the most is like how I actually feel useful for pointing them in the right direction for different things. So like for issue spotting and saying, well, you probably need to get more experience in this space, or like the product liability attorney can help you out here. So it is knowing that attorneys generally can't do everything. Like one person can't do everything because you need to know like the specific law. We're very willing to point you to other people and to try to help you build the network of people that you do need. So I think that's one thing that's helpful, but also just keep in mind that your attorney has a lot of other clients. So I work with a lot of other startups. So if I see startups that kind of can help each other out or at the same stage or might be good, partners for one another, just kind of making those connections is something that I found is actually an interesting one. To kind of connect dots and help people along the way that way. So you kind of have somebody like Addie was saying, it's my first time fundraising. I don't really know what I'm doing. So it can be helpful to have like a peer that's going through that same stage. Cause I think a lot of times it's happenstance if you're out at a networking event and you run into someone who happens to be doing the same thing you're doing. But if you're working with an attorney for that specific thing, like even, writing patent applications, then it might be helpful for you guys running the company to talk with another client or talk with somebody else who's at the same stage. So I guess that's the little lawyer piece, but what about like mentors and advisors? So I'm curious, for me, I would be very curious if there's, people that you're just drawn to because you get along with one another, or you're at the same life stage, or you see them at, a lot of the same events, versus are you very particular and pointed about, I need to learn this space, or I want to go, this is my target customer, so therefore I'm going to try to find someone to be a mentor in this space. So is it intentional or is it kind of just organic?
I would say it's a mix, organic and intentional. So we did form an advisory board at the end of last year where we were very intentional finding professionals that had, diverse career experiences. So we needed somebody, really with a lot of experience in supply chain or in manufacturing or marketing and sales. So we have 6 advisors. You can actually find them on the Pluie website. And we meet with them quarterly, but we also meet with them individually on a monthly or biweekly basis. So we wanted to find people too that have like walked in our shoes. So I think we've learned a lot from people who have started their own businesses. And we also have reached out to other female founders. So almost on a weekly basis, we're either regrouping with other female founders that we've met over the past year, or we're reaching out to new founders. And then I would say last, our mentors, we have amazing mentors who have, known us since we were in our early 20s that have been extremely helpful. And I would say one of the biggest lessons learned, especially, for high school and college students, get involved, intern, try and meet as many people and keep in touch with them. Like we have reached out to people from, college, from high school that have been really helpful, whether it's introducing us to a potential new customer or introducing us to a potential new employee. And actually JD on the phone here, he's one of our interns. He's actually from DePauw University, which is where I went to college. So speaking of kind of leveraging your network, I reached out to DePauw University and asked if they had any students that'd be interested in doing an internship for Pluie. And here JD is, he's doing a summer internship.
Yeah, I guess I can touch a little bit on that too. It's like Pluie's team, I think, is like really important too. You, Brittany, and Addie have talked about like a lot about that product, but you're right. Like being able to reach out and being able to like join a startup that happens to have, like a 6 to 7 person team, and you learn a lot from the people that you're working with. So it's like a super valuable experience. Reach out, use those connections, because that no one's really going to reject you. Like if you reach out to alumni, they're at least going to help you a little bit. They'll give you some tips. So it was definitely like been an awesome experience so far, and it will continue to probably be a really good experience. But yeah, just to kind of mention again, like the team that I think Pluie has kind of built is almost just as important as the product. A lot of the people that I work with every day is really hard workers, and they believe in it. And I think that's like really important. If, you do grow your own startup, is to kind of look at the people you're going to be working with. Do they believe in the product as much as you do? Do they believe in like the goal? So I guess that's just another thing that Brady and Addie have done a really good job of. So, yeah.
And JD, you are located here in Cincinnati, so I want to hit on that piece too, that it's kind of interesting. These days with everything being, Zoom capable, that it is a lot easier to have a team that's dispersed in different places. So I think, again, like collecting contacts along the way and networking, you never know, what will happen. But for the people in the room today, maybe reach out to JD. He sounds like he'd have a lot of good advice for you, and he's here in town. So.
Yeah, and it's really cool. It's also an advantage. Like I'm in Cincinnati. I know we have we work with you in Cincinnati. Then we have like another design agency in Cincinnati. So they need boots on the ground here. Like I'm here and they're in Chicago. So, it's almost an advantage to have like a dispersed team across the United States. So.
Thank you. So Addie, just curious your comments on the advisor and mentor piece.
Yeah, I think, kind of back to Brittany's point about how I shared Pluie early, and that it's really helped to, once you have an idea, it doesn't need to, we didn't have a product, right? And we started talking about it. And so it was intimidating at first. And I mean, no joke, I know this is being recorded, but so I probably shouldn't say this, but it was like, we were selling this product we didn't even have, right? We didn't even practically know if it worked. It was just like, here's, and so, but there's a benefit to that, because the minute we put it out there on LinkedIn and on Instagram, people would kind of come out of the woodworks like, wow, this is so cool what you're doing. Like, do you need help? Or, oh, my friend's this, whatever. Like an ex-boyfriend of mine bought a table, right? Like you never know, right? Just don't build any bridges or burn any bridges. But so I think it's really interesting to kind of combine the two. So trying to get advisors and mentors, and then sharing your idea with as many people as possible. And whether that's texting people or putting it more on a social networks channel, I think that really helps to have you even form your own personal board of advisors, right? You don't have to have a company just start assembling in your mind or on a piece of paper, like who are the 5 or 6 people that could really help me with this? And you kind of almost have your own network in your mind of, he'd be great with this, she'd help with that. Just start thinking through that as you think about an idea you might have. But yeah, I think it's a combination of both the organic people we could really see could help the business overall, that we were drawn to, that believed in the product, and then also now filling the gaps or holes of, if you look at our board on a kind of macro level, who are we missing, or where is our weak spot? Because, oh shoot, we really don't have someone who knows a lot about this, and that will be looked at as we continue to think about raising money. But again, similar to even at any stage you're at, who are your personal kind of board of advisors that could help you with the idea, and start kind of building that in your mind and sharing your idea, which I know is intimidating, but it's I think it'd be helpful to share as often as early as you can, because you'd be surprised.
Thank you. So we're down to the last 5 minutes. So I think we should open it up for Q&A. Michael, I don't know if you want to hop back in or if you guys want to put your questions in the chat, that'd be great.
Yeah, I've been monitoring the chat. I haven't seen many questions pop up, but at this point, if you have a question, you can either put it in the chat or unmute yourself and just ask. Feel free to ask. Okay, so Kenya wants to know, how many hours a day do you work on average?
This is my favorite question. I'll cut myself off after a minute. I could talk about this. But everyone always says or asks, oh my gosh, you must work around the clock. And that's not true. And I say, we don't work around the clock, but we think around the clock. And that is very much how I describe life as a founder, a co-founder, being as a leadership team member, advisor. It's just all we think about is Chloe, right? I'm grocery shopping and it's like, oh, what if we did this? But that doesn't mean I'm sitting at my computer. I have 2 kids, almost 4, almost 2, so 2 toddlers, and I drop them off at daycare and I leave and sign off around 4:45 to pick them up. So I don't even work till 6 p.m. or whatever is traditional anymore. I don't know. And I have dinner with my kids. I do bath, I put them to bed, and I get back online, but a lot of times because I want to, right? Because I'm passionate about what I'm doing. I want to watch the video that came through. I want to reply to someone and do some work before I go to bed. But I really feel like what's important to Brittany and I is that we have a good sort of work life. I won't say balance. I think that's a tough word, but you know, we really respect each other's schedules and that we have a life. And I don't think you need to work around the clock. I think you can really kind of manage it. And as it gets easier too, as you do build out a team, because you're not doing it all on your own. So, you know, I think there was certainly a time where Brittany and I were doing everything, and now it's becoming a little easier as we are able to have help. But I think that is one myth that people celebrate almost, which is a disservice to people that like, oh, you should be working around the clock. Entrepreneurs, all they do is work. Like startup life is so hard and it's stressful, right? We're always thinking about it. We answer to investors, like the pressure is very much on. We're managing a lot of money in a big product and a potentially big business, but that doesn't mean I'm sitting at my desk all day long and all night. And that's something that I'm proud of and really respect as we continue to grow. Brittany and I do text each other though and solve problems during our children's bath time though. Sometimes it's like we become really good multitaskers, I'll say.
That's always my favorite question that Addie answers, you know, and JD made a good point, like just really ensure that you're passionate. If you guys decide to work for a small startup, or even if you're working for a large corporation, just be passionate. And that's actually why I went to the fitness industry, because I just knew I was passionate about fitness, and it will make work feel less like work if you're passionate about what you're doing and the product service that you're promoting.
And there's a lot of articles out there and books probably about like block time. And I really believe in that. It's like, if you can get so much more done if that's all you're doing. And so when I do work, it's like, if I come in here, I'm working for 4 hours, right? And I don't look at my phone, I don't eat, I don't read, right? So I think there's also like, there's interesting ways to budget or manage your time where someone can work for 8 hours and someone else can get the same amount done in 4. And I think it's just like learning how you work and what times you work well. I work really well early morning. Brittany works well late at night. And so kind of just, you have different times you're creative, right? Or you think better. And so I think it's like, especially now with the culture being more Zoom and non-traditional, you can really kind of work your best self at your best time and don't have to be so traditional in hours.
Awesome, guys. We have one last question. Just try to answer quickly so that we don't hold everybody over too long. Are you guys working on some new ideas for your product or just focusing on your current idea?
No, that's a great question. So a year ago, we put together a product portfolio strategy. So that's also something we'd recommend. Like, don't just think of your first product, think about your product extension or your services that you can offer to really build the business. And we're so excited about, you know, Pluie is a B2B product. So in a commercial public restroom, you know, what else can we do in the public restroom? What can we do outside the restroom, but stay in B2B, so that public space, and then maybe eventually pivot to B2C and come out with some consumer products. So and when you're raising capital, it is important to have the vision of what this looks like beyond your initial idea, whether that's reoccurring revenue streams or, a product portfolio strategy. So that's really exciting that Addie and I we would love to spend like hours every week just thinking about the future. So great question. Good one.
Awesome, guys. Well, with that, I'm going to wrap up. Thank you for everybody attending, and thank you, Addie, Megan, and Brittany, for doing such a great job and presenting your idea and sharing your entrepreneurial experiences. If you are part of the program, please see the survey that I just sent in the chat. I'll also send it in GroupMe. But also be sure that we do have, or to attend Monday's pitch competition training. So I know in some cases it's a holiday, but we still are holding that for you guys so that we can keep you on track with your ideas. If you have questions, let me know. I'll be reaching out to your teams individually later today. But thank you again, everybody, for joining. Appreciate it.